Proper story is supposed to start at the beginning. Ain't so simple with this one. Now here's a kid whose whole world got all twisted, leaving him stranded on a rock in the sky.
When I was in second grade, my parents got called into a parent-teacher conference because I wasn't paying attention in class, because I had stolen a roll of masking tape from the teacher, and I was using that to make little model biplanes in my desk. Both of my grandfathers were builders, and I have a lot of their tools around here. I have my mother's father's drafting set, his compasses and drafting points and rulers and such, and I have my grandfather's machinist tools. I have his end mill bits and his lathe bits and various calipers and sorts of things like that. And I've always built that way. My mind works like a machinist or an older draftsman. I have a lot of new guys, young guys here that work for me, and showing them solutions to problems that we have in the shop that have been around since the 1920s, and using a compass to make registration marks and make lines, and they're like, wow, that's the coolest thing. I would have never thought of that. I'm glad that I learned that way, and I'm glad that my parents and my grandparents taught me that sort of thing, because it comes in really handy. Knowing the limitations of the material that you're working with is very important when you get into a project like this, because you have to plan that stuff very early on. The principal consideration for the construction of the sailhammer was weight. If this thing was made out of one of our other plastics that we really like to use in the shop called Sintra, the finished result would be 15, maybe even 20 pounds. When we're starting a project, it's daunting sometimes to look at something, even like the sailhammer, that might not consist of a lot of elements, because you don't really know where to start or how to break things down. The way that my mind has always worked is to take a piece and dissect it into what could be considered geometric elements. Things sort of build as layers, as shapes stacking on top of each other. That helps me break a project down to be less daunting and less intimidating, is to look at what each component part is constructed out of, make a weird little donut shape and a ring and then a post, and then wrap it in something and eventually build into the finished product. At my studio, we've built replicas from both Bastion and Transistor, both Supergiant titles, and they are polar opposites in construction. The sailhammer is a lot more sculptural. It's a lot more freeform. It's more organic. And it takes shape in the way that clay sculpt would, in the way that just sort of pushing things around with your hands kind of brings it into shape. I have patterns for this project, but they're tracings. I wanted to keep a little bit of the roughness of the hammer, a little bit of the artist's hand, if you will. I wanted it to look like a hewn piece of stone. Just sitting down with a cutting pad and a bunch of X-Acto blades and trimming everything out by hand and checking fitment, filling gaps and sanding, it's kind of brings me back to my roots, which I really like. My favorite part of construction or prop fabrication is painting. I really love the paint process. I think that weathering a piece and painting a piece helps it to tell a story. You can imply that something has had a rough life, that something has been cared for, that something has been aged but also revered. And all of that can be subtly hinted at with the application of the right amount of paint in a crack or the right kind of split in a finish. The sailhammer has a really sort of cartoonish facade to it, but there are a couple of small elements on it that have a little bit more grit, and it's something that has lived through a lot of experience. I like to call the process of painting and weathering gradually ruining a prop until it's perfect. And That's absolutely what the Sailhammer was, because the entire time I'm painting this thing, the yellow's going on and I'm like, that's too bright, and then the shading's going on, I'm like, it's too dark, and then I mask off and I paint the red and I'm like, was that too heavy-handed? And then peeling the masking tape off and looking at it all together, it all sort of comes together at the last second. I don't know that I've ever had a piece that wasn't like that. Every single thing I've ever painted, I have felt like I am ruining it up until the very last second, and then I'm like, it's great, it's perfect, it's exactly what I want it to be.
So build that wall and build it strong.